Welcome, everybody. So this is presentation mode. Hopefully everybody was able to get their technology working to the best of their ability, and you're able to watch right now. So I wanted to welcome you to our first installation of our PASCO EdX Talks. My name is Mike Bishop, Director of Stakeholder Engagement here at the PASCO EDC, and I'll be your host for today's event. Before I introduce today's speaker, Jonathan Quarles, I want to take a brief minute to go over some of the housekeeping items that will help you navigate this unique platform. You may have noticed already that this is a virtual replica of an event hall where you can see and speak to everyone at your table while also double-clicking on other tables to move around the room and virtually network. You can also chat with people individually with your current table or with everyone at the event by using the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Right now, we are in presentation mode, like I mentioned, which functions much like a standard webinar. So you have the same chat functions I mentioned before, but to the right of me now. You can also enter questions into the Q&A tab, which I will follow and ask Jonathan those questions at the end of the session. When we are done with the presentation, I encourage you to stick around for more virtual networking and then click on both logos for the PASCO EDC and Jonathan Quarles to get more information on the programs we offer here at the EDC, as well as information about Jonathan's upcoming book. So with all that covered, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Jonathan Quarles. Jonathan Quarles has had a lifelong passion for building businesses and creating change. As a serial entrepreneur, he started his first business as the top-selling paperboy in his neighborhood at the age of 8. After graduating from Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, or FAMU, Quarles held several prominent positions in both the private and public sectors. Leveraging his experiences around building bridges between people and ideas, he then founded the BTL Group, a strategic business development and relationship management platform. Jonathan's work with the BTL Group has earned him a place as a highly sought-after advisor and as one of the world's most well-known connectors. Quartz Water Source, inspired by the Flint water crisis and Flint being his hometown, is his latest entrepreneurial venture. Founded with the mission of expanding the global access to clean water, Quartz is an embodiment of using entrepreneurship for social impact, a topic that's very important to Jonathan. In fact, Jonathan's first book, Making Dollars While Making Change, a half memoir, half playbook for using business to do good, recently opened for pre-launch. So I'm sure he will be telling us all about that today in his talk. So help me virtually welcome Jonathan, and I will grab him and get him up here to the stage.
All right, well, it's definitely a plum-pleasing pleasure as well as a privilege to be here. I guess let me first and foremost thank Bill for that wonderful Mike for that wonderful introduction. Respectfully, I would have to say that that's probably the second best introduction that I've ever had. Last week I was doing a virtual talk and the person that was supposed to introduce me didn't show up, so I had to do it myself. But with all due respect, that was the second best introduction. But thank you so much, Michael. I also want to thank my good friend, Bill Cornyn, for years of our friendship. We met years ago and remained in touch. And he's been a huge part in bringing this together. And I just want to thank you and all the team, the PASCO EDC team. I truly count this as an honor as well as a pleasure to kind of talk a little bit about what I find to be very my passion, which is making dollars while making change. But I would also say that in high school, I was in debate. And sometimes I would listen to my coach. My coach would always tell me particularly, or remind me before I get up and present about the 4 S's. And so the 4 S's is simply stand up, speak up, shut up, and sit your behind down. And so she would always have to remind me of that because I have a tendency of talking a lot back then and even now. And so you'll be happy to know that I put together some points to make sure that I am brief. I have about 15 minutes or so to kind of share some points with you. And I'm hoping that it brings value to you. And I'm really looking forward to the dialogue that we'll have together. But I want to. It's almost like Mike kind of took some of my speech from me here. But I mean, I'll talk a little bit about growing up in Flint. I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan, as a Flint native. I grew up in a time, specifically in the heart of the deindustrialization. And I grew up with very humble beginnings where I had my parents worked hard. They were blue collar workers. but we just were not. We had very humble beginnings, and so that was one of the things that I loved and appreciated the most. But one thing I realized is that in order for me to change that lifestyle, and to be able to help and impact my community, the way that I actually improve our situation, particularly financially, was through entrepreneurship and business ownership. And so, as Mike mentioned, I had my first job. Actually, my first, what I call my first business, was as a paper boy. When we used to have paper boys, I don't think we have that anymore. But had that and had several other businesses throughout the time growing up in Flint. I have friends that sold drugs, and I know that in my house, my mother and my father were very involved into my life, and I just couldn't do anything like that. So I had a lot of legal hustles, is what I call them, from janitorial businesses to t-shirt companies and things like that. And I just always had a knack for just like entrepreneurship. Um, and so, one of the things after graduating from high school, I was fortunate to have a full ride academic scholarship at one of the schools that's highly acclaimed, often imitated, but never duplicated, Florida Agricultural Mechanical University. And so there I had an opportunity to hone in a lot of my business skills, and then one of my first businesses that I started as an adult was at that time called Common Link Consulting Services. And with that, I had an internship with Coca-Cola. I was working with a guy by the name of Tavis Smiley, which some of you might have heard of. But at that time, Coca-Cola was having a lot of issues around affirmative action. And Tavis Smiley, as a Black thought leader, television host, and radio host, was able to merge this partnership. And this was actually my first time doing it. Didn't know that it was actually a business that you can do, where you can put together business ventures and be almost like the middleman. And so that's what Common Link Consulting Services started as. I also saw a need that we didn't have vending machines in our dorms. And so I was able to negotiate a deal with Coca-Cola North America, in Atlanta, to have vending machines in our schools. So these were like the little different things that I was learning about business and finding a need. I always looked at myself as a problem solver, and I think that's what an entrepreneur, in my opinion, the true definition of an entrepreneur, is solving problems. So I had the chance to do that, and I think that was probably the first blueprint of what I would consider making dollars while making change. It's just not enough, and this is what I always tell my mentees, or just when I have opportunities to talk, is it's not enough just to make money, but we have a responsibility to make sure that we're impacting our communities and in the world in a very unique way, as we are successful business people. Um, so after college, I got an opportunity to pretty much have some really amazing experiences. That was post my MBA. I had an opportunity to work for a foundation, which was Tavis Smiley Foundation, to really understand how to really create social impact and to raise money, and how dire the need is with lack of funding. I also had an opportunity to work as a senior advisor to the mayor of Detroit, as his senior advisor, and understanding how you actually manage and balance a budget. How do you work the political as well as the social experiences to make sure that at the end of the day, the citizens' needs are being met and city services are being received? And then I had an opportunity on the back end of my experiences of working for a couple multi-billion-dollar corporations, in which I was one of the youngest senior management executives there, and just having an opportunity to really see how a multi-billion-dollar company actually works and runs. And so those experiences were all good. I almost look at it as like my post MBA education, because I've always looked at myself as an entrepreneur in all those aspects. I never looked at myself as just an employee. I looked at it as I had a goal, and I knew what my exit strategy was: to get in, learn as much as I possibly can, get involved, to have some deal with some serious challenges and figuring out how to find solutions to it, and then take all of those skill sets that I learned and then transfer to the business ventures in which I am currently working in. It wasn't my life specifically was changed forever, of the birth of my daughter. Um, she was born. I was actually on the road a lot. I was running a lot of our global sales for an IT company, and we're getting ready to take this particular IT company public. Um, I remember looking in her eyes when she was born and just realizing I was never home. I was always traveling. I was always trying to, uh, go after the next deal. And for me, that was where my life was redefined. I said, I was always raised with the core of making sure that community was first, family was first, and everything else, and spirituality was first, and everything else kind of came second. And so for me, I realized that I needed to have a profession that complemented my number one priority, which was being a father. And so now, 3 kids later, you know, that was part of the reason why I went out and literally left this decent paying, safe, and stable job to go full time as an entrepreneur and starting the BTL group, which is started off as just a business development consulting practice. And then it evolved into an international business development practice over the past 3.5 years, where a majority of my clients now are based in other countries, and these are high growth companies that are looking to do business in America. And so that was something very critical as it relates to COVID-19, because in the midst of everything, my international clients, because they couldn't travel to the United States, they realized that the highest value now was having a person on the ground that can still help their business grow from a revenue standpoint and from a social engagement standpoint. And so I'm seeing my international consulting practice now having evolving to primarily international and not just domestic. And so that's an exciting part and a part of the pivot that we can talk more about if there was any questions to that. The next thing was Quartz. So in 20 Quartz water stores in 2014 was inspired by the Flint water crisis, which my hometown. I actually have family and friends that were affected, and still are impacted today because of the crisis. And I just remember sitting back and during the time of this heighten, I wanted to do something about it, but I just didn't know what I could do. And then I had an opportunity to travel in 2015 to Israel. And in Israel, some of you that may know, Israel they are the pioneers of water technology, and met up with a company that actually has atmospheric generation technology. And at that point, I realized that was something that I wanted to figure out how we can bring to Flint, to my hometown. And it primarily was just for Flint, until we started peeling back the layers and building the team and understanding that 1 out of 3 people in the planet does not have access to clean drinking water, whether that's through contamination or whether that's through lead in the water or water shutoffs and all of the different issues that we're seeing in North America, not in a third world country, but in North America. And for me, that was something that really just, I couldn't, it didn't sit well with me. And I realized that there was something that I needed to do bigger than Flint, that this problem is bigger than Flint. This is a world problem, but let's take it home. Let's take care of home first. And so Quartz Water, we've launched. We're now commercially we have commercialized this technology, and we're looking at providing this for NGOs, municipalities, state governments. And again, this is a second line water solution, and not we're not competing with any municipal water because we just can't. But we look at ourselves as almost like water insurance for governments, for NGOs and things like that, prisons and hospitals. So we're super excited about that. It all goes to the mission of making dollars while making change. It's a triple bottom line company, and a portion of everything we make goes back to Flint related foundations and funds that help fund projects within communities that suffering with water problems. So we're really excited about that, and we love to talk more about that with you all. And then last thing is the book. So the book is something that I started writing during COVID-19. I had a little bit more free time because I was at home every day, and not necessarily on the road. And within 3 months, I was able to write about something that I've always had a dream of writing about. This is the things I'm very passionate about. Is how do we create or provide the intersection of business and social impact in the world, and making sure that entrepreneurs, aspiring as well as current entrepreneurs, understand that there's a greater responsibility with being an entrepreneur. It's not just about solving a problem and creating a great business model, but it's important to make sure we take care of our planet. It's important that we take care of the people that are affected in the communities. And so the book it's a playbook. I mean, it talks a little bit about some of my formative experiences, and the things that I've learned, but then also things that lessons learned, as well as things that can kind of help take you to the next level as your full self, and not just from a business standpoint. But I talk about mental and spirituality and different things that I use that I thought was helpful in creating the businesses that I created and some of the business that I've sold and things like that. So the book is available pre-order. I am going to share my screen with you guys here. If I can. so this is, so the book is available for pre-order, and at jonathanquarles.com. And I guess my ask would be, one, I would love and would really appreciate your support in purchasing it, sharing it, and also sharing to your platforms and for any opportunities of virtual talks. I think that hopefully you all are fulfilled by it. There's a lot of great things, and I spent a lot of great time, and in some places really became super vulnerable in this book, speaking about some of the growing up in Flint in a very rough community where I experienced a lot of crime and a lot of death. But all those things helped me to realize my why and my purpose, and that's making dollars while making change. So hopefully there was something here that you that spoke to you. And at this moment, I guess I would ask Mike to come back to the stage, please.
I'm here. Thanks, Jonathan. That's great. So we have a few questions. I have questions myself too. So I always love when we get entrepreneurs on here. I am a fellow entrepreneur myself, and it's always great. People want to ask a whole bunch of questions about successes, right? So talk a little bit about like the behind the scenes stuff. You know what I mean? The things that people don't really talk about that goes into driving this passion for doing good while you're doing business.
Yes, I think the biggest thing for me is that when you think about businesses, I always talk about passion. If you don't love what you're doing, you're not going to do well at it. And I think that we all have gifts and talents. There's actually a poem that I love, and it's A Bag of Tools by R.L. Sharp, and it goes a little something like this: Isn't it strange that princes and kings and clowns that caper in sawdust rings and common people like you and me are builders for eternity? Each is given a bag of tools, a shapeless mask with a book of rules, and each must make your life is flown a stumbling block or a stepping stone. And essentially what that poem means to me is that we all have tools. We have hammers, we have nails, we have screwdrivers, we have wrenches. But the reality is those tools are nothing without the other. And so for everyone that's in this room and for all the work that you all are doing within the organization, before you do anything in business, if you don't have the right team, if you don't understand your why and your passion, you won't be able to build the change and the impact that you want to create. And I think that's so important when it comes to businesses. Figuring out what is your why do you want to do it, and what kind of impact is it making to not just yourself, but to the world?
That poem. Thanks for sharing that. The passion's a big piece of that. So how do you translate that passion to social change? So it's the passion for what you do, and then taking it that next level to actually impacting social change.
Yep. And that goes back to, like I said, your business model has to be aligned to your value proposition. And at the end of the day, with the mindset of going into business with not just the intent of just the single bottom line and making sure you're in the black, that's very important in business. But also, how is it actually affecting the community or the customers in which you are working and serving? I would also say customers that you're serving, not working. And so that's something that's very important.
I agree entirely. So there's a good question on here. I love this. If you gave your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
If I gave my younger self a piece of advice, I would say read a lot. One of the things, and I'm trying to move this thing here. Apologize. I'm trying to get back to the.
No, it's good.
There we go. Okay. All right. My younger self, I would definitely say, so I'm 38 now. I think I spent a lot of my 20s really honestly chasing like money and opportunities. I don't have any regrets, but what I did learn, and one of the things that I would tell a 20-year-old or a 19 or a teenager is, one, learn as much as you possibly can. Don't worry about money. Just worry about having experiences and opportunities and making the most out of them. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Because what I realized through all of my years of working, some of my former boss that I've worked for, it's important to make sure that you don't burn bridges and you treat people with the way that you want to be treated, but better. Because at the end of the day, business is it's a human relation issue. It's all about people. nothing else, nothing that matters but people. And so people want to know that you care about them, that you're accountable to them, that you're responsible for them. And my younger self would say, spend less time partying, spend less time doing things that didn't bring much value to my inner self as well as the world. Um, because life is short. And as I mentioned, growing up, I've experienced my first death I saw when I was 12 years old. My best friend got murdered, and I never thought I was going to live past 30. And so for me, when I was younger in my teenage years, in high school in particular, I was living each day like it was my last. And so to this day, I still feel that same way because I don't take anything for granted. And more importantly, I have more to live for. I have three daughters, three beautiful daughters that I would, God willing, I'll be able to, love them and nurture them and give them experiences and exposure that I had and I didn't have.
That's right. Couldn't agree with you more. So I want to go back to the hometown because, there's a documentary on Netflix right now. I don't know if you've seen it, Rotten. Have you seen that one? Yeah, they actually do a piece with water and talk about Flint and the challenges there. So like you're bringing this social change charge back to the hometown. Talk a little bit about like the new technology and bringing it there and the major barriers. And I know they're still there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of our biggest challenge in when we started last year, what we did was very different from most companies. Before we started presenting our business value, we essentially sat down for 6 to 8 months and started talking to the community, not just community leaders, but the community, people in the neighborhoods. We was talking to faith-based community. We talked to business community, philanthropic community, and what we do, we were asking them, what do they want? And for us, even being a Flint native and a trusted friend of Flint. There was a lot of people that just didn't trust the technology. And, that's fair. I mean, I remember the first time the previous mayor, we had her to taste, we asked her to taste the water and she was just like, oh no, I don't want to taste the water. And so it took us some time to really earn the trust of the community. And that's kind of our motto. Before we go into, we try not to be prescriptive in the way that we do our business. When we're working we're actually talking to other communities right now. We work with folks that are on the ground and people that actually talk to the people. And we have them to help guide us. We're like, we don't want to tell you how you're supposed to do this or how we roll this out. We want you to tell us who we need to talk to, how do we need to present this. And we just want to be servants to the people because we believe that water is a right, not a privilege. And we want to make sure water gets to the
people. It's a relationship aspect that you were just talking about, how it's really revolved around relationships.
Yep.
So you talked a little bit about COVID-19 impacting you, kind of, writing a book. What other things have you had to adapt to and coming onto this whole thing of the new normal, right?
Yeah. So it's funny. So with Quartz particularly, we actually made a pivot during COVID-19. Originally, our business model before COVID-19, and we actually had some really good opportunities in the pipeline. One with a pretty major global hotel global hotel chain. We were originally just bottling. We were bottling the water, and we were selling to hotels and restaurants. But obviously hotels and restaurants are things changed during COVID. And so we had to make some very serious decisions. And so I must applaud my team. I have a very, very amazing, talented, and capable team that we had to sit down and really work out a new model. And so now our model is our second phase is bottling, but we're leading off now with making sure that this particular technology is getting into the hands of communities and organizations and governments that are in need of water. And the good thing about our technology is that it's our technology partner is WaterGen. This is a industrial scale water system. And so we're able to produce more water than any other atmospheric generation technology right now. And so, up to 5,000 liters a day in just one machine can be produced. And this is clean water that comes from the air, which for those that don't know, the cleanest water you can ever drink is actually from the air. So not only is it clean from the air, but it goes through a filtration system, a very, very sophisticated filtration system, and then it's mineralized at the end, right at the tap. So you're getting the cleanest water with great pH levels that's not compromised. And every time it's not compromised by any underground infrastructure, any chemicals in the air. And this is like I said, we're really proud and excited about the partnership we have with WaterGen and getting this into all the hands that's of the people that's needed. And we also have noticed that during COVID-19 is the time that people need water for more than anything else. And so that's quartz. The second part is with the BTL group. Like I said, our business has actually picked up with our international clients and new clients because of the fact that they can't travel. So they need someone on the ground for those that don't have locations. So we found that that's something that's been growing, and we're really excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and absolutely with the pivots during COVID-19, the water. I mean, not just that part, but the social change part, the demand for social impact, and more of an emphasis on that. So that's a big part. So another question here: how can communities help to promote entrepreneurship?
I think this is one way. And I kind of talk a little bit about that in the book. So I would encourage that whoever asks that question to pick up the book, and I kind of go extensively about how community can help with entrepreneurship. But I think it starts from like when you think about K through 12, one of the things that I always wished growing up was that we talked about taxes, and we talked about business plans, and we talked about credit. We don't talk about that in schools. And I know part of the reason why I wrote this book, Making Dollars While Making Change, originally was because my whole goal was to figure out how do we create an entrepreneur curriculum within K through 12 in all public schools throughout the United States. That's how it actually started. And so this was one aspect of kind of like getting into the door. And, I found that most people, when I was having these conversations with school superintendents, they were like, well, what makes you an expert in this? So it was like, we got to write a book. I said, okay, well, I'll write a book. And so hopefully we do a good job. Well, I think we will do. We've been doing pretty good right now with our pre-orders, but this is like the introduction of what I'm hoping. To me, this is one part of my life mission, is to be able to expose particular in underserved communities these kind of opportunities and these skill sets, because it's all about exposure. I tell young people all the time, and young people don't remember this, but Kodak film. It's like being young is almost like Kodak film, right? Sometimes all you need is a little bit of exposure. And, if you've not been exposed to entrepreneurs that are innovative in the way that entrepreneurs are now, and being able to leverage technology, because the world is so flat now. It's important that you have, in order to be an entrepreneur, the thing I tell people all the time is that if you're not doing or thinking about globalization, if you're not reading the Financial Times, and you're not reading about what's going on in the world, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And so we have to be thinking globally, and we have to start when kids are starting to talk. Like my daughter speaks right now 2 different languages. And so I'm hoping that we get to the third, and that's Mandarin is the third language. But in order for them to compete, the baseline is globalization and looking at these small things like investing and my kids have an entrepreneurship fund. So I want them to be able to lose money, and so they can see how it feels, and then figure out what are the lessons learned at a young age, so they can build that skill set, and then also build that to lose money is something that, I'm an angel investor also, and I've lost some money through the past years in the 6 figures, and so it still hurts me to this day. But it also motivates me knowing
you learn.
It helped me to
you learn.
Yeah,
that's no better way to learn right there.
Yeah.
They say failure is the condiment to success.
Definitely.
That's definitely an example. So you mentioned technology. I'll wrap it up with this one last question. I'll let you off the hook. So can you share any tips, during COVID-19, how you're leveraging technology or marketing, social media? Is there pamphlets, word of mouth, things like that? Can you share anything that you've come across that have been helpful?
So I'll say this platform we're using right now, Remo, is I think one of the most dynamic platforms. And I honestly, I talked to my team about this, and we're going to figure out how we incorporate this in the work that we do. Obviously, we work with all of the Zooms, the Teams,
sure,
and the Google Hangout a little bit, but realizing how to even be efficient and effective in this environment now, because you can be on a Zoom call every hour on the hour.
I did
so
yesterday.
People think that because you're working from home. Yeah. And so like I always tell my team, I'm like, okay, I have to make sure, because we have limited amount of time, but we have so much to get done. And we're mission driven, and everything we do, it's not just about just the business, but it's like, okay, we the time that we're spending, you know, on these Zoom calls, is it actually positively effectuating change in the community? And so, you know, we look at time management from a different standpoint, the way that we actually look at our calendars, and really trying to leverage all of digital media, social
Right.
media, which I wasn't really a big social media person about 2 or 3 years ago. But I'm realizing that we've been able to touch people, and just within our launch with courts, the folks that we've been getting good feedback and people wanting to collaborate and do some amazing things in the community. That's because we were able to leverage and utilize analytics and understand like how the things that we're putting out, how do we measure the impact, and how do we quantify? Because I'm really big on analytics and I'm big on like data. But that's what we're finding. And then, like I said, it's also creating that balance. Technology is helping us to create that balance where I can, in the middle of the day, go out and ride bikes with my daughters, you know, things like
That's
that.
the important stuff.
So, yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate it, and thanks for giving all the information. It's a great story. I encourage everybody to check out the book. And of course, you know, this is going to conclude the presentation, but please, you know, feel free. We're going to go back to the tables. Jonathan will be at a table. Go find him and ask him more if you have more to ask him. I'm sure he'll hang out a little bit. So thanks again, Jonathan.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you all.
Mm-hmm.